This is the Tuesday workshop at the Thinker Business Accelerator, where we enable faith-based entrepreneurs to spread their product, service, or message to change the world. Here with our faculty members, Naomi Ahlstrom and Paul Edwards. Welcome.
Good to be here.
Yeah.
It is good to be here. All right. So the thought that's on my mind, unless you guys have something else that has been coming up in your minds, the thought that's on my mind is twofold. One, goal setting.
Yes.
Paul, you and I chatted just briefly the other day about that. Setting financial goals, business goals for the upcoming year. I've talked about setting a focus word for each year. I'm sort of in that time period of the year where I start to think about those things, and I won't actually set that until between Christmas and New Year's. Which is kind of like setting a goal, personal goal for the coming year. And then I want to couple that with another thought I had, which is in regard to relationships or having conversations. I read a great book called Crucial Conversations a number of years ago, and it came up again last night that there are sometimes emotionally charged conversations that we need to have that are crucial. It's either going to bond us together or it's going to tear us apart. There's both benefits and risks at play. How do we treat those? And so I'm pulling those things together in with the goal setting to think about next year. What do we think about our relationships and how we interact with one another and how those relate to things we want to grow in, or maybe goals we want to set for the company? That's my thought.
Wow.
So yesterday was 2 for the price of 1 then, in a sense, Jason, because it never entered my mind that you weren't a goal-oriented person. But I felt a little apprehensive about bringing up the topic of setting sales and financial targets for 2024 and talking that through. Just because we've spent a lot of time working on, the fun stuff, right? The product and finding the right people and all of that. But eventually, what we took it back to the fact that, over time, if you're doing something, you do want to trend better at it, and you want more and more of the stuff that you've mastered to become automated and predictable, and, then make room for innovation if you need to. And all of that requires, in business, it requires steadily increasing revenue figures, which means you have to change, if you're not getting that and you haven't really set a parameter of what that looks like, you can't really expect to grow. You can't really expect to be able to improve it or make it more widely available, find more and more of the target client, because you don't even know what you're after. So, it went very well, and I made a lot of forward progress in terms of doing that. But nonetheless, it's one of those things that internally, what the thing that goes on in my mind is this the right time to bring this up? Well, it's the end of the year, in the mainstream culture, it probably is. But is it the right time? Am I getting ahead of myself? Am I getting too fixated on money to any sort of unhealthy degree? So it was a bit of a leap of faith, just the conversation that we had yesterday. Naomi, what do you say?
As far as I don't feel like my thoughts on it are necessarily quite on topic of business so much as, well, it's more mindset goals. It's been a long week of potty training over here. And last night I was taking a break and gaming with some friends, and the topic came up of habits and being conscious of how what we're doing is affecting other people. And it kind of sent me into this like inward spiral, not downward spiral, inward spiral of self-reflection, because it's a pirate game. And so if you're on a ship, there are jobs that need to be done. Like who's at the helm, who's manning the sails, who's checking the map to make sure we're going in the right direction, who's like it's all a team building game, right? Or if we get attacked by another ship, who's fighting the other ship. So if you're solo slooping, if you're on like a single sail solo ship by yourself, you know all the rules, you know where everything is at. And for me, if I'm next to an island, I'll turn the helm all the way to the side and I will hop off the helm, drop the sails, and then adjust the helm so I am going straight for my destination. What that turns into in a group setting is I'm having to be in touch with where my destination is, right? But in a group setting, my brain kind of turns off. I've noticed this because my friends, when I play with them, I have one friend in particular, he's like, stop grabbing my wheel. Like, cause he like gets mad when I grab the helm because I habitually grab the helm. If I hear the helm let go of, there's a sound effect. There's a sound effect when the sails get used when they're being adjusted. And then, so if my trigger is the helm getting released and the sails getting dropped. So what I realized is my reaction as soon as I hear the helm get released and hear the sound is my reaction is to grab the helm and adjust it straight, because I don't need to be thinking, it's just my reaction. And so what that turned into is when I'm soloing, I know where we're going and I adjust the wheel to where I'm going. But when I'm in a group, I'm not thinking of that. I don't have a destination in mind. I assume everyone else is doing the thinking for me. So that turned me into an inward spiral of what other situations in my life am I doing that in? What other situations in my life I don't have the goal in mind. I'm in a group setting. So where else am I looking at the situation and going from muscle memory and being less conscious, taking a back row seat because other people are doing things. It's a team effort. And so I kind of like let my automatic responses take over. And I was talking to my friend and she was like, I think most people do that. If there's a group setting, people kind of like take a back burner approach. They kind of like let other people man it for them. But that's when you need to be. And then that turned into a whole conversation of that's where you need to be more conscious. Because when you're on your own, yeah, you're at the helm, you're taking care of your own ship, you're taking care of your own life, your own business, your own family. You are doing everything. When other people get involved, if you're taking a back row seat, if you're doing this thing where you're kind of letting the muscle memory kick in, that's the last place you want the muscle memory to kick in, because your actions are directly affecting the team. Your actions are directly affecting the people around you. You need to be more conscious in that moment. You're not letting it be muscle memory when you're soloing, but if you let it be muscle memory when you're in a group setting, then you're letting the team down, because you need to be more conscious in those times when you're on a team, because your actions so directly affect the entire team. And so for me, the idea of goal setting and knowing where you're going, last night they were complimenting me at making the conscious effort, because I said, hey, I didn't realize that's why I was doing that. But now that I know, I can watch for it and prep for it. And they were complimenting me on not grabbing the freaking helm, because I would adjust it straight. What would happen is I would straighten it out or turn us in a direction that we weren't supposed to be going, because I was talking, I was running my mouth, and they would like get mad at me, stop grabbing the helmet, because I would just do it. And so it just turned into this, it turned into this whole psychological inward spiral of where else in my life am I doing that, where I am blindly adjusting things because I assume other people are doing the thinking for me and not taking the wheel, letting muscle memory take over and not having that conscious. This is what, like, I made sure I did not grab the wheel last night unless I knew exactly where we were going and where we were already on the map. Because, and they were complimenting me because I made that conscious effort. Because if we know where we are, if we know what the problem is, and I think that that's going to be a big thing going into this year and setting goals for myself, is something that I said to my friend last night is I had no idea until I said this out loud during this play session. I had no idea that's why I did that. I had no idea my muscle memory was attached to those sound triggers. But now that I know, I can actually do something about it. And I think it's important when you're goal setting, you need to know where you're at, why you are at where you are at, and the goal setting needs to be it needs to be on course with where you need to go, and you need to be conscious of those triggers, those muscle memory triggers, the things that make you an absent team player. You need to be a conscious team player. You need to be on the team. You need to be conscious 100% of the time. Um, and especially if you're like leading a business, leading a company, leading a family, that's crucial. You can't let somebody take that. Anyway, that's why I was like, kind of like, yeah, there's my whole spiel. I kind of went into a whole, yeah, like I said, inward spiral last night. And it actually was a lot to do with, okay, what is it about me that I need to change? Where else in my life am I doing that? And how do I fix that?
And I think that's the task for all of us, that is to look inside as we are, I guess the word commonly now is called triggered, as some situation arises and we begin to respond in a way that we do not like, or maybe we look at and think, I'm not certain, this person's causing me. That's one of the others. This person's causing me to feel such and such. And the opportunity really is to look inside ourselves and assess what process is my brain going through in this moment that is not because of this moment. Because we're only processing now based on every moment before now. It
Right.
does not mean that now it has to be processed that way. It just is because we've resolved whatever. Or worse yet, maybe we haven't resolved whatever's gone on in the past. And now we're taking it to this moment. So the reason this came up for me, kind of like you, Naomi, is, I had a couple of conversations yesterday, one a business planning session with Mr. Paul here. And I didn't know that was the topic we were going to discuss, which is totally fine. And it's a topic that should be discussed. And then let's do
Mhm.
something about it, right? And a little bit of brainstorming, a little bit of action, a little bit of testing, which seems like there are already some positive results from that. Then uh, I I had a conversation that we needed to have just here at home regarding some misunderstandings that had arisen over maybe 2 or 3 separate times in the past month and a half or so, where it's just like this interaction didn't go as well as I had wanted it to. Like I was a bit blindsided by whatever came up, and then I responded in a certain way that was not specific to that situation. It was just a map, kind of like a habit, a process that my brain ran through, things I read into it, because then I responded that way. Then, you know, she responded the other way, and we resolved each one of those situations in an atomic manner, right? They were done.
Mhm.
And yet the thread seems to be grow. It's like, oh, wait a second, there's some commonality developing. And so we sat down last night and we're like, let's talk through the common components of each one of these things. And what began as maybe like some festering hurt, which would lead us into this situation where we're not going to have the conversation. We're just going to like,
Mhm.
we'll just deal with it, which is
Passive
not the right
aggression.
answer. Like
Yep.
I've done that before, right? I'm not doing that. We're going to talk
Yeah.
about it. And instead of letting these things sort of resolve, pretending that it's going to go away, we sat down and went through for 2 hours or so all of the things we needed to discuss, the things that were in our. I always like to talk about the things that are in your bucket. Like
Mhm.
just walking around every day, you're like, yeah, that was an offense. Drop it in the bucket. This is something I feel. Drop it in the bucket. Or like, I don't want to talk about this. Drop it in the bucket. Right. And eventually that bucket gets so full. And depending on who we are, we carry around various sizes of buckets. And then there's a precipitating matter, which is like, oops. And we spill the bucket on the other person. And all other person's like, oh my gosh, what is all this stuff? And
Mhm.
the answer is, well, I've been carrying it around in my bucket for the past, you know, how long? And my point is, okay, well, let's keep small buckets and empty them faster. so that there's nothing that's festering. Well, after this 2-hour discussion, thinking about the whole 2 month and a half or whatever of things that have a process that's sort of been we've been following. I've been following it, and she's been following hers. The end result was a bullet point of something we're going to try to be aware of, which is no unplanned crucial conversation.
Oh,
Mm.
We can resolve the stuff. We've done that. We know how to do that. We process it. The common theme between each one of these things was it was at a time when the other person did not expect it.
it wasn't mentally prepared for it.
They were not in a situation where they could hear it.
Hmm.
But when it's planned, we can have the conversation. And that was just the bullet point. So it's kind of like setting the goal for the next, if we're thinking about growth, maybe goals that or growth that lead to process changes that lead to better results, it could be a cacophony of all sorts of things that are coming up. It could be a month and a half of little annoyances or whatever that seem like they're resolved. We know they're kind of not. But after we talk about it, if we have a good framework to talk about it, then it might become just that one little bullet point that says, you know what we're going to do going forward. We're just not going to have any unplanned crucial conversations. Done.
You know what I was hearing the back and forth there between the two of you. What had suddenly occurred to me yesterday, Jason, was that what gave me hesitation was something Naomi said. You have to know where you are. And based on the outcome that we arrived at, I didn't even know I was where I was to some degree, right? I was sitting on top of an opportunity that I didn't know I had. And I was gun shy about exploring it because it was so nebulous to me, because I have spent so much time in this other area. And I'm trying to think of a useful analogy, but it's like I've spent so much time trying to get to the high hanging fruit of what I'm doing that it's like I've built this elaborate scaffold to try to get to the high hanging fruit. And the low hanging fruit is sitting down there saying, drop, one piece after another dropping to the floor. And I'm like, I'm not even paying attention to that. Eventually, if you spend enough time doing that, you forget that the low hanging fruit is there, or that you even have a chance to go after it. But the high hanging fruit is so hard to get to and so infrequently made available that you're on feast or famine cycle, but it's mainly famine. And that's not a good place to be if you're an entrepreneur. I'll just own that publicly for the umpteenth time. But so what do we do? So, I can briefly say one of the things I've learned to do, is that, many times the competing is not the right word, but the vision that I want to construct for my business isn't in here. Because I've spent so long focused on other things, I didn't even know how to, fumble my way back to it. And that's where, you lean on the principle of working with people who are a lot smarter than you at that part of it to fill in the gaps. And once we had some clear data and numbers that we could look at objectively and say, these numbers are what they are, irrespective of how we got them or where they came from or what we did to get them or what we didn't do anything to get them. There they are. Now what are we going to do with them? Well, I said, okay, that's not really working. And I don't know how much more we could do from a sales standpoint to accelerate it. And so you propose this different trajectory that's aligned with, the overall brand, but it's a brand But in terms of anything I've ever done, it's a brand new strategy. And I was immediately like, oh boy, I don't know about this. I haven't done stuff like this before. Um, and again, it's one of those things, well, we're doing it together. And so I don't have to figure all of that out. I do have to show up. I do have to participate. I do have to have, something to contribute to it. Um, but the best, I think I felt like, there was something in me and I couldn't explain it until today. I was like, I don't know why, but I feel like I've just done something that a really good leader does or would do. I've dropped, once again, I've dropped this pressure to have all the answers. I've allowed somebody much smarter than me to fill in the answers, and I'm just going to go with it. Sometimes that's the way you have to do it as a leader. And then you don't care about who gets the credit, right? Because
Mhm.
if it achieves the objective you're after, everybody wins, and I really don't care who gets the credit. I'd just like to get a little bit better tomorrow than I am today. So,
Well, one of the things they talk about in the book, Crucial Conversations, I know I'm name dropping that again. I just love the book. I'm getting nothing off of this. There's no promotion.
Right.
But Crucial Conversations, great book. They talk about this pool of shared meaning that each of us comes now, to that conversation that needs to be had with our own perspectives. It's our own information, our own viewpoint. It's nobody else's viewpoint. That viewpoint is built on every moment prior to now. And it all exists in our head. So I've got my little diagram here. Boop. It all exists in our head. I come to the meeting, and too often we just spill out everything that exists in my head as though it is the reality.
mm,
This is God's truth to you. And I need you to recognize God's truth. Instead, Crucial Conversation talks about that curiosity is actually one of the more critical components to having good conversations, because we want to be curious about the discovery of the other person's viewpoint. And so two people or more come at the situation with the pool of shared meaning and the opportunity. And gets back to something you've talked about. I think both of you talked about the idea that, you got to be careful who you work with,
mhm,
because we have to come to those moments with the trust, and trust is built over time, and continued interaction. But we have to trust that other person's coming to that moment, not to attack me and not to tell me that what they're saying is true. Like I have to just accept it, but I have to show up in such a way that allows that other person to take their bucket and empty it into the pool of shared meaning. And there's a great visual that comes out of Harry Potter in my mind, where Dumbledore stands around this little thing in his
Mhm.
office. I don't even know what it is, right? And he pulls the thought out of his head and he drops it into there. And then he looks into the water to see what's really happening. And
mm,
that's what we have this opportunity of when we come to a planning session or a checkup session or a what's the future session or a course correction. I love you talking about, on being on the water and things that you do in your game, Naomi.
Yeah.
One of my thoughts was, one of the calling the bullet point, no unplanned course corrections. And we went through it, and she's like, "You're
Mm.
using the same word, challenging, crucial. You're just exchanging the words." I was like, "No, the word means something to me." Right? We come at those moments, dump our buckets into this pool of shared meaning, and then we can all look around it and say, Do you see what I see? Okay, I see that. Do you see what I see? Now what out of there matters? What out of there is something that can be done, that we should do? And because once we dump it all out, it doesn't all matter. It certainly doesn't all matter now.
Mm.
And everything has a priority to it. It's just life. And then we can reach in together with whomever the stakeholders are and pull out the thing that really matters and go, oh, wait a second. We actually have a process for all of this. It's just we keep coming at this at the wrong time. It's like, what?
Right.
Who would have thought? You know? And meanwhile, one person has it built up in their mind, like, this is a difficult conversation. Oh my gosh, not sure how this is gonna go. And the other person's like, all right, well, let's just talk it through. and it comes down to one bullet point after 2 hours, that we say this is a foundational element to how we're gonna relate to each other in the future.
By which greatness is made, if you ask me, is that meaningful collaboration with the right people. Um, it doesn't, it doesn't just happen, and it's not merely, this is one of my favorite things to, sorry to get philosophical here. This is becoming a staple on the workshop. I have my philosophical moment, right?
Yeah.
I
Wax
used to,
philosophical.
I used to think, right? I went to church and I heard the preacher say that this passage in the Bible where Jesus says, "Wherever two or more are gathered in my name, there I am also." And so I used to think if I stand in a room physically with another believer and pray for something, it's going to happen. And then I tried it and it didn't happen. So I said, well, what do I do with that? And then the problem, of course, is one of context, right? He's actually citing a legal precedent there. What he's talking about is in those days, right? Each town and village had its own judiciary, its own 3-panel um, judges who decided criminal cases and all that sort of stuff. So they had to have a 2-to-1 majority to issue a ruling. So if two or more are gathered in my name, there I am also. He's saying if you make a rule, two of you are gathered together and you make a rule, I'm behind it. I'm backing it. That's what he's saying. It's got nothing to do with two Christians standing in a room praying and they automatically get what they want. So, so you need a context in which to work, right? And not everybody fits that context. Not everybody is qualified because for various reasons, some of them are totally innocent, right? They lack the maturity, they lack the experience, they lack the insight. Other people, obviously, you have no business doing that with. They're toxic, they're destructive, they're et cetera, et cetera. And so, but if you do it with the right people, and it's not easy to nail down exactly who that is, right? You have to search for them. If you do business, marriage, life, friendships with the right people, that's where greatness comes about, because you have the foundation of two people who are bought in, committed, and not willing to give up on each other. And that's what I think Jesus was really getting at when he said that. Even though he was referring to the legal precedent, the people he was addressing that comment to were his most devout, sincerest followers. Not a bunch of yo-yos at the back of the crowd cracking jokes and just standing around being part of the action. And there's a difference. So that's my philosophical bent for the day.
What's been ruminating, Naomi?
The conversation that I had last night, it started with, sorry, I'm going back to this game because this game, it's such a team building game. But my friend, with what Paul was saying, like building trust, my friend and she and I have been playing for a while, and I was talking about how I kind of do this autopilot thing, and she was like, and I was like, yeah, I'm terrible on a galley, because a galleon, you can have up to 4 people. But those ships are huge and they're hard to man because they've got 3 sails. They've got 3 sails to adjust. I think they have 4 cannons on each side. And then they have the helm, and the helm you have to turn it a lot to go anywhere. They take forever to turn. And it's easy with 4 people on a crew. It seems like everything else is happening. So anyway, she was telling me, so two things came to mind. One, the conversation that I had last night where I was like, I feel like I'm terrible on a galley. And she's like, yeah, you're one of the worst. And I was like, I realize it's because I go into autopilot. And then our whole conversation happened of like, oh my gosh, when you're with other people, that's the last time you need to go into autopilot, when you're in any kind of team. And then I was like, okay, but now I'm doing this self-reflection of where else in my life am I doing this? And so we kind of talked about it for a little bit, and she and I were like going on about it. And then she didn't just say, yeah, you're terrible in a team setting. What she said was, yes, I noticed that you struggle. And I've noticed you're one of the people who struggles a lot with this, but here are the things that you can do better. It wasn't just, you're terrible. It was, this is something that I've noticed. Like, but I introduced it. I introduced the conversation. And I said, I noticed that I struggle in this team setting. And she said, yes, but here's ways that you can improve. And I realized last night that that's one of my love languages is when someone gives me something that I'm doing wrong, but not just like I have this constant internal dialogue of you are a burden and you know nothing and you're terrible at everything. Like that's my internal dialogue that I'm like constantly fighting. And so when someone tells me that I did something wrong, I'm like downward spiral. But if someone tells me I did something wrong, but here's something, instead of going into that downward spiral, here's something you can work on. Here's a bit you can grab onto and work on and improve on. That's a love language for me. And I didn't realize that. And then the other thing that came to mind too was sometimes in these hard conversations, if the other person isn't necessarily ready, but you know your part, you can take your part in that conversation and do that part. I had a conversation with someone recently where I did something and I didn't realize what I was doing was upsetting. I didn't realize that I had said one thing and done another or something like that. And how they approached me was as though I consciously did this thing was intentionally harmful or was knowingly hypocritical. And I was like, I had no idea I did that. How they addressed it with me was very abrasive and very confrontational. But I was like, okay, I could go and hone in on the fact that that was confrontational and I'm not going to be spoken to that way. Or I could say, hey, you said this thing about me and I didn't realize that I was doing that. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that. And so I did that instead. I was like, hey, thank you. Like, and I was like, so I went in and I had that. So what you were saying, Jason, about earlier not having not important, critical conversations unplanned.
Crucial.
Crucial. Not having crucial conversations unplanned. I do think there are crucial course corrections that need to be spontaneous. And I think both of those things, like, so last night and then this other conversation, because what I did was, hey, I appreciate that feedback. And I'm so grateful you told me because I actually had no idea. You talked to me as though I did, but I actually had no idea. So thank you for that. How that was addressed with me, not okay with that. As inappropriate, not cool with that. I do so much appreciate that though. And please, I invite that. Please tell me. Like, please tell me if you notice something like that and it's frustrating, let me know. And guess what? 2 days later, something happened and it was a completely different conversation because I course corrected myself. I let them know how I felt about that thing, but then I course corrected myself. Then last night I invited the course correction where it was like, hey, and also something, Paul, that you were mentioning earlier about, what was it? Asking questions and seeing, oh, what were you saying? You were talking about, I've been ruminating on like everything. You were talking about like asking questions and having that. I think you're talking about openness. I don't remember exactly. It was like 10 minutes ago, maybe 15. But the thought
Realizing
came,
that you don't even you don't know where you are.
yeah. And that's something too, is like relationally, my friend last night, she said, when she was giving me pointers, she said something that she does if she's not sure what to do. Cause I noticed that I kind of get overwhelmed with decisions. If there's too much to do, I'll get overwhelmed with decisions. So I do good at like following instructions if someone gives me instructions. But then she's like, hey, but then you're giving it to somebody else to think for you. And I was like, oh, that's true too. So then it became, she said, what I do in those situations is I ask people, whoever's at the helm, they're basically captaining the ship. And so I ask them, what do you need from me? Or I let them know, hey, I am ready at the sail. Let me know when you need me to raise sails. And so it's show up and ask questions. Show up, say, here's my preparation, and ask questions like, where are we? What do we need? What does the team need? And asking questions of the people around you to see where you're at.
Mhm.
And so, and being willing to take that feedback. Like Paula, you were mentioning a few weeks ago doing the, what was it? When you get examples from people, examples of opinions from people about a business.
Oh, surveying and getting feedback.
There's like a word for it though. Like, it's like the gathering that information. It's like case studies, but like,
Search.
yeah, yeah, that network research. Is that what you said?
Market research.
Market research. Okay. Market research. Um, market research. That's what I feel like when it comes to setting goals in our personal life, in business, and anywhere we're like doing a team thing, like all of it is market research, right? All of it is market research that can be applied to every other aspect. And it
Mhm.
all depends on what Cooper chill. Lay down. Sorry, my dog is very excitable. It all comes down to no. It all comes down to like our mindset going into it. How can I apply this in this area and this area and this area? Like I've done with this video game, I've applied it to my personal life and the business life. And like, and this is a friggin' video game where I pretend to be a pirate. Like that's, I literally, it's a great game though. I highly recommend it. Like there's my little plug for Sea of Thieves, but it's really great. And I'm really great. I'm really grateful for what I've been able to learn about myself in this game. Um, and what I've been able to learn about being on a team, what I've learned about toxic independence. That's a big one for me. But yeah, I love what you mentioned about like, because everything is market research. Everything can be turned into self-reflection. Everything can be turned into meditation. How are you applying it? Are you like, I kind of keep a constant prayer in my heart of like, God, is there something I can learn from this that I
Mhm.
need to apply? What can I learn from this situation? No matter how shitty something gets, whether it's a game, whether it's a circumstance, whether it's drama, whether it's potty training, what do I need to learn from this about myself and how I interact with the people around me? And how can I make that into a success?
Mhm. The more you ask those questions, the more you'll be pleasantly caught off guard by how differently you react to things over time. That
Yeah.
that used to send you off the deep end, that no longer do.
Yeah. That actually reminds me of the other thing that came to mind when you were talking is, or actually it might have been when Jason was talking, but like triggers, because I was talking about like, um, cues, I guess, is more cute, like triggered cues of like muscle memory, like the things that trigger your muscle memory, like those cues that you hear, whether they're um, situational cues or sound cues or something that trigger muscle memory. But when you guys are talking about um, something that came to mind is there was another circumstance where there was something that happened and someone reacted in a way that was negative, and I was like, "Do you want that to keep happening? Okay, what's your plan? If you don't want that to keep happening, what are you doing to stop it from happening?
Mhm.
Okay. And how are you going from there? Like if there's something, because there's those cues, right? Those brain cues that turn us it change like trigger us into those muscle memory situations. But then there's also those triggers that have us react in a way that might not be healthy to the people around us and might not have us make decisions that'll be beneficial to our family or our business or whatever else. If we're was it luck favors the prepared can go into you can prepare yourself for those curveballs, but that only comes like you can only prepare, you can't prepare off of cues. Well, you can prepare off of cues, but you have to have the right cues. Hold on, I had the right thought for this, and I lost it. I like put it down, and oh my gosh, I totally had a brain fart just now.
Well, let me, if I can uh, touch on something that you had said earlier.
Mm,
You talked about you talked about course corrections, and sometimes course
mhm.
corrections need to come just off the cuff.
Right.
And um, one of the things that came up in a discussion, or as part of this discussion I was having, that the time the time and spirit or heart, call it, is important
Mhm.
because um, one of the things the book talks about, and this is held very true for me, is to have a good dialogue with somebody. You have to be able to balance both being candid and being caring.
Yes.
And I can tend to be very candid. I don't easily become caring.
Mm.
I work at it. It is work effort for me to just genuinely care. And it's not exclusive to other people. I do it with myself. It's just how my brain is wired. It might be a strength in certain circumstances, and it becomes a problem in others, a weakness. And for others, uh, they become so caring that they are unwilling to say the thing that they need to say.
Yeah.
They are unwilling to make the point that needs to be made. So they're so far on the caring side that they're not candid. Neither one is great because being overly candid, and this gets back to timing, there are times when it's not the right time because that person can't hold the space to, like for me, because it takes me effort, emotional effort to be caring. It can't be at a time when I'm already emotionally depleted or dealing with a bunch of other stuff because I don't have the strength. My brain will go right to the candid thing again, which is a strength, and I won't be able to have the effort in that time to be caring. Likewise, it might not be the time for a person who's caring to be able to muster the strength to be candid because for that person who's usually high on the caring side, one of the highest values is I don't want to upset the other person. I want this relationship to be smooth, right?
Yeah.
And that it was actually part of the conversation. It's like, okay, well, one of my higher values is to be caring. All right. Well, one of my higher values is to be candid. Okay. We both have to be there at a time when we can put ourselves in that other space, and it takes effort, and it just can't be off the cuff because it will be likely at a time when the emotion drove the cart forward. Like now, oh, we need to press on the gas. No, you don't. You're fine. Relax.
Mhm.
You could deal with this 2 hours from now. You could deal with it a week from now. It's not that important now. So I think one of the principles that is drawn out, not in the book, but from personal experience, is be able to balance being caring and being candid. And that requires some thought, if you could put the thought into it. Now, over time, we begin to understand the other person's process. We begin to understand where they're really coming from. We begin to understand all of the stuff that's contributing to how they see the world. But that is years, thousands, tens of thousands of hours with a person to
Mhm.
really uncover and understand. We don't even understand it about ourselves half the time. How could we expect somebody else to understand it accurately? And so when we approach another person with curiosity, tell me tell me about your experience. Without I'm not here to hear judgment. I'm here to hear it on the to hear you, to create a space, hold space with you, to just put it out into the universe.
Mm.
And it's going to be messy. And you might not even be seeing things the way it actually happened. But who cares? This
Mhm.
is what I need to get out. And until I get it out, I can't resolve it. And I can't resolve it with you if I think you will never let me get it out.
Yeah.
I
Go ahead.
okay. So to your point of like not having those conversations without like off the cuff, like I I think the rule that there needs to be with off the cuff course correction is because different people can show up differently, right? Like you were mentioning, some people it's harder to show up emotionally. There's logic and then there's emotional. There's logic. There's I'll read this quote first and tell you why like this came to mind. Like while you're talking, I was like, just yeah, oh okay. Anyway, so it says honesty without kindness is brutality. And kindness without honesty is manipulation. Um, and something that I've like been working on specifically and like realizing consciously is that there's a difference between being kind and being polite. Politeness isn't necessarily always kind. It might have kindness as the root intention, but politeness can mask things that need to be said. And then you're not being honest. You're not being forthright because you're too worried and polite to say what needs to be said in order for that communication to come out. And so that brings me to like where that rule of thumb like my rule of thumb, I guess, in that conversation that I had, that course correction, the one that was invited, I invited it however it needed to happen because I invited it. I instigated it and I wanted to hear however it needed to happen. But the other one that I instigated, course correction for somebody else, I accepted the note and I let them know how they talked to me wasn't appropriate. I made sure something that um, and like Jason, you were saying, it takes tens of thousands of hours with somebody. If you know how to meet someone where they're at, like for instance, somebody is if someone who is higher logical stamina and someone with higher emotional stamina need to have a conversation. And the person with the emotional stamina needs emotional support from somebody with logical stamina and their emotional stamina is depleted. Then the person with that emotional stamina needing that emotional support from that person, if they need to approach that person, they need to come at it with a logical side and meet that person where their stamina is greater and where their cup is greater, like where they're going to have that greater capacity. Because if someone comes at that person with an emotional need, that person's already depleted. And if you can tell that somebody is emotionally charged, and you have a greater emotional stamina, you can tell meeting them, like if they're depleted in their emotional side, you need to come at them from a logical side. If they're depleted in a logical side, you need to come at them, you need to approach them in an emotional side. And I think that that's where that balance is. And that's where learning to speak other people's love language comes in and learning to speak people, like meet them where they're at, because you need to be able to read the situation, see where people are at, and have that course correction. But you need to be able to, if it's receiving them, you need to hold that space for them spewing it however it's going to be spewed. But if it's something where you have a need from them, you can tell they're depleted, you need to come to them where their greater stamina is. You need to be the one to get into that space for them. And it's on you. I think that's like one of my biggest rules of thumb is if I am asking for something from someone, I need to come at it on their level. I need to meet them where they're at. I'm not entitled to them just seeing things from my perspective. I need to put it on their perspective and be ready to hear what they have to say for that and make sure that like I'm ready to ask it in a way or express it in a way that speaks to the stamina that they have left and not where they're depleted. I can't be asking someone to give more juice from a depleted battery. They need to recharge. But if they have a different kind of battery that's already charged, then it's my job to use that battery instead and get onto that level, I think. Anyway, I don't know if that makes any sense. Does it?
But what is so it does, but so what to to bring it all together here, we at the outset we were talking about how this
Goals.
relates to goals. And what should people be like, I'll just use the example again from our conversation yesterday, Jason. The way it ended up was not anything like the way I expected it to. It didn't abandon what I went into with it, but it put a whole new spin on the way we're doing things. And so that's one example of what I think people should expect when you start to have these crucial conversations with the right people. What are some other things that you might anticipate? And maybe they're positive and maybe they're not, maybe they're painful, but what are some things you would tell people to anticipate as a result of doing your crucial conversations uh, as you work towards goals?
My first thought on this is that it's not goals, it's growth. And I get to this in my book, What Could Be, found in fine bookstores everywhere.
Available anywhere. Yeah. Anywhere books are sold. Yeah. At least
But
once an episode.
but one
We
of the
fulfilled our
things,
quota.
one of the reason that comes to my mind that it's growth and not goals is that just putting something down on paper that I want to do something, uh, sort of the definition of that as well. It's a task. It becomes sort of functional and binary in nature.
Yeah.
I did or did not achieve such a thing. And I think we need to just let ourselves off the hook a little bit because uh, that sort of management of life is just not reality. You can do that. You can kind of pseudo do that for just so long, and then it's like, okay, well, I'm the asshole. Whereas if we just go at it with growth, and it's not necessarily binary, it is movement in a
Mhm.
forward direction, whatever that is to us. Um, then it becomes more like what I talk about in the book. Who do I want to be and what do I want to do? There might be some goals that I want to achieve, but then there's the who do I want to be? And in the space between people, let's say in a crucial conversation with a significant other, where's the binary nature of that? We are or are not getting, like, we argue better. We what? Like how do you just, it's not yes or no. It's
Mm.
you know what, we've uncovered. Here's something that exists that we'd like to limit that. This is something we're shooting for. And it doesn't have to be done today or a month or 10 years from now. This is something it's just something we're going to call each other to, that when things get all haywire, we go back and say, yeah, but these are the principles we've decided. We decided those principles for a good reason.
Mm.
Let's bring ourselves back to those principles. Are we operating by this principle? No, we're not. Great. Then let's correct ourselves in this moment. Over time, that leads to growth. And so when it gets back to, let's say, business, there's a tendency to be binary in nature about goals. Businesses do it all the time. We're going to have 10% more growth this year. It's like, why? Why not 11,
I hate it
12,
when no
15?
context. I hate it.
What's the point? Right? And really what it is it's designed to just produce consistent
Numbers.
results.
Yeah.
No, kind of no matter what those are. We're just going to produce consistent results. And the larger the organization gets, the more they tend to not want to hit a ball. They're not swinging for the fences. They're doing base hits because base hits can lead you to consistent results. Are you going to be an all-star? Probably not. Will you be in the game for a long time? Probably. And you can look to people who swing for the fences. Let's say an Elon Musk. He swings for the fences by buying Twitter for billions of dollars. And everybody surrounding in quote unquote business are like, that's a terrible investment. He wiped all this market value out there. He doesn't want advertisers. No, no, you don't understand his highest value. His highest value is not for the sustaining of this business. His highest value is to make a place for free speech, and he thinks he can do it there.
Mm.
Uncensored free speech. That's what he's trying to do. And so everybody who thought we were playing this one game of this is business and investments, he's playing a different game because he can. When he dumped his bucket into the pool of shared meaning, he had an entirely different thought, which
Yeah.
led him to an entirely different conclusion, which over time we then look at and go, was it successful? Was it not successful? Is it leading us towards some, better future, whatever that's defined as, and we all define it differently. So I think in business, we set out you were talking about some financial goals, right?
Mhm.
And then I came at it with, well, there might be some prospecting changes that could be made. And here's the fastest way, I think, to develop some of these areas, which was not necessarily the direction you were coming from, because that's not the map that you follow. That's not a process you would go through necessarily. It is the process I would go through. And yet on your mind are all sorts of other things that I would never go through because I've never done them, never
Yeah.
thought about it. And so when we dump it all into the pool of shared meaning, we say, okay, well, let's shoot for, let's say, a goal that we have, that's out there. Let's back it out, but then let's also add in some changes that need to be made, which will not only lead us to that goal, but could uncover a whole new sort of uh, a whole new lead generation, a whole new path for revenue. that didn't exist before.
Yeah.
And I think that's the I think getting back to well, how do we navigate these situations? One of the fundamentals, if we were to lay down some principles, who's on the team, and have we created a space where you can dump your bucket into the pool of shared meaning? And then have we created a process by which we look at that pool without judgment? It's not right or wrong, it's just information.
Yeah.
And then we pull out together and say, this is something that we can all work towards. And if you can't work towards it, you either have the wrong team or you have the wrong vision, the
Mm.
wrong future in mind. And if
Wow.
you don't meet that goal, is it still okay? In a relationship, probably. But are we better today? Did we learn something from this? My parents are very, very fond of that phrase. What did we learn from this? And I've adopted it. It's like, okay, what did we learn from this? It didn't go as planned. All right. What did we learn? If we learned something and we can carry that into tomorrow, then we've made progress.
So, what have we learned today?
Yes.
I think I love the aspect of crucial conversations not unplanned. Um, Setting goals, you need to make sure you have your goal clear, your direction clear of where you're going. Course corrections, they can happen along the way, and then those crucial conversations after either, and I think they can kind of all go hand in hand. The crucial conversations, the course corrections, the I think you need to be clear on your goal and the course corrections. When we're dumping buckets and seeing it all, I think that's how we determine where we're at, because we can't set goals without knowing where we're at. And so we need to dump our buckets, determine where we're at, um, set our goals, start going there, have course correcting conversations along the way, and then also plan some crucial conversations of how are those course corrections going? How are we doing? What are we learning? How are we growing? Because
Mm.
at the end of the day, goal setting, achieving a goal, it's not about getting a specific number, it's about growth. And when we look at that growth, that's actually knowing where we're at. And we can't set a new goal without knowing the growth we were able to achieve with our last goal.
One of the things I'd like to reconnect into this conversation is something you came up last night where I come at a lot of situations from a fear-based mindset. I'm looking for ways, and it's a little bit surprising that that's what happens in my mind because it comes out in a different way. But in terms of interpersonal relationships, business I treat a little bit differently. But in interpersonal relationships, a lot of this fear-based mindset, like how is this going to affect everything 20 years from now or 10 years from now, or how all the ways it's going to go wrong. And and the balance to that was, yeah, but this other individual, she's like, I can think 6 months out. That's it. Like, and so I'm here for today. Like I'm here in the now. And it's interesting that that sort of balance, not only the caring candid balance, where I need to be brought into caring because that's where relationships are built. And candidness is where relationships are directed. Uh Not only do I need a candid caring balance to pull me into the caring, but I also need somebody to pull me out of the fear and say, yeah, but let's look at today. Let's look at the 6 month. And without that balance, I tend to, I'm a pretty strong headed and capable individual. So I'll just uh, go out on my own. But I think we need to, back to the point of how do we bring this into the present for our viewers and listeners, we need to we need to recognize the strengths of people around us, not necessarily their roles, their strengths. Some people are in wrong roles for the strengths that they have, which is all process of learning. But who are we surrounded by? What are their strengths and what do I need? What are they seeing that I'm not seeing that is not wrong? It's something that I'm not good at and maybe do not see normally, but they see it and they are around me for a reason. And then where you started all this stuff, Naomi, what does that mean about me? Whether it's playing a game and I see a pattern developing, or whether it's in my intimate relationships, I see a pattern developing, whether it's my business, I see a pattern developing. And then what is that pattern principled on? Are those good principles, not good principles? And then how can I correct to reach the vision that I have, but correct it at the right time? And not everything is of significant importance, but when you need to correct it, you need to correct it, and you can't correct it in a vacuum. You got to correct it with the people who are connected to it. And then obviously that develops, these skills of being how to have a good dialogue, how to listen effectively, how to listen without judgment, and then work towards the common goal of figuring out what is the real thought here that we can drive forward.
Yeah, because before you and I talked yesterday, Jason, I got challenged for the umpteenth time. There's no goal, there's no objective. And I'm like, yeah, because I'm not just going to throw a number out there for its own sake, particularly when I have zero idea of how to get there. And I've tried multiple things and they all haven't worked, or haven't worked. They've worked a little bit, but not like I want them to. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to wait until I get to have a conversation where I get to share that. Whether I'm right about it or not is immaterial at this point. I need someone to take into account that I have tried stuff. It hasn't worked. And someone to look at that, objectively and say, okay, well, there's probably some reasons why that is. And if we think about it long enough, maybe we'll come to the conclusion that there's a reason that what you're doing is not working. And maybe we need to try something else. And I love it when I reach that point because there's always something we haven't tried. But you could pull a rabbit out of a hat and say, well, I haven't tried this. That's not going to help either. That's just going to drive you further and further into the ditch. So you got to find the right objective to move towards, the right goal to move towards. And that is not easy to do, but it's much more easy to do in crucial conversations with the right people.
Naomi, you have any final thoughts?
Oh, I feel like I kind of already said.
All right. Yeah, I think it's a great topic. It's certainly a timely topic for me because as I go into my end of year goal setting, growth setting, I don't know the word that I'm going to choose for this coming year, and I didn't do a good job with last year's word. However, there was a significant amount of growth in unplanned areas in this past year. Areas that I didn't know I needed. I knew I needed to grow. There's something I wasn't sure about. Wasn't flowing. I was afraid of these certain areas. But when the growth came, it's like that's profound growth. That's big structural things that Jason can take forward. But it wasn't on my list.
Yep.
It was not encapsulated in my one goal, my one word I was going to focus on. So I do think that everybody's opportunity for any time period that you want to delineate. And I think the year, there's nothing magical necessarily about the new year other than we are people of habit. We are people of rituals, and rituals have a way of defining periods of time for us. So whatever that period of time is for you, define that ritualistic time. Maybe it's the new year, and maybe have the conversations that need to be had, and read the book Crucial Conversations. Give yourself a leg up, or talk to somebody and have them help facilitate a conversation that needs to be had.
Mm-hmm.
And we all have those things. But in all of our situations, kind of, and I love that you brought it out, Naomi, that you can just be playing a video game and discover really valuable things about ourselves, and then take that into our everyday, which then our day sets us up for a week, sets us up for a month, sets us up for a year, sets us up for a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, What a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining me as we unpack this today. I don't know what to call this conversation when I go put it online. But man, such value here. I'm
A
excited about
crucial conversation about crucial conversations.
yeah, better relationships through better conversations. I don't know.
Yeah.
I appreciate you both. Thanks for spending the time with me. Thanks for all of our viewers and listeners here at the Business Accelerator, where we help faith-based founders change the world by spreading their products, services, and messages. Man, we're winding down this year, and I'm pretty thrilled. Thrilled about the people who I get to wind down this year with. So, thanks everybody for joining us today.
Great to be here.
All righty, bye.
We do this. Bye.